All right, so good evening, everybody. Um, I'm guessing a lot of you are going to be watching this on the recording since there's not a lot of folks here tonight, but that is okay. Um, we are getting to the end of our course, so a couple of housekeeping things. I do think some of the modules are not posted yet. I'm working on that, I promise. But a lot of the information we're also covering in class, so I'm not going to make you watch things like multiple times over if what we're touching on in class is covering what that topic is. Um, that said, I'm bumping the module 24 about developing self-advocacy as a transition skill to next week. Um, I did have for our last class, which is May 16th, um, and really May 9th and May 16th, if we're interested in having you guys showcase some of the work that you were doing with your case study or with your project. So my initial thought had been to put you guys in breakout rooms and share, but I don't know how many people want to share, and I'm not trying to push too much. But at the same time, when I look at what's in the chats and the discussions, and I hear what's going on with you guys in the breakout rooms, I would really like for some of you to share. I will not record if you're sharing, if that's part of the concern. But just kind of showcase what it is that you are doing for your case study, maybe something that you've learned, something you've tried in your classroom that's been successful or not successful, because I think I said recently, if we don't get success, at least we get data. So just putting that out there to you guys, and we're looking at the second half of May 9th and then May 16th. And then that is it for our class. I need everything submitted to me. I think May 16th is the deadline I have on everything because I have to submit grades on the 17th. If there's concerns, shoot me an email or make an appointment with me and we will chat. And otherwise, unless you guys have any housekeeping questions, we are going to go into our discussion pieces for tonight. All right, well, if you have other housekeeping questions, you can always shoot them to me. So last week, when we left off at the end of class, we were talking about the IB program and kind of the place that we're at with IB right now, where we're trying to work with an international organization, but at the same time, we're working within the constraints of our school system with IDEA and all those pieces, and what those implications are, not only for teaching in the classroom, but for advocating for our students and ensuring that they have the access to the accommodations they need in order to be successful. And I know that a bunch of folks said that they would like to revisit that topic and continue their small group talking. But I'm going to throw some other pieces out there, and then I'm going to give you guys some choice breakout rooms to go talk in, because it's not just about APIB, of course. There are a lot of things happening right now, right? It's articulation season, it is placement season. I know at least 3 or 4 of the people on this call, like, we've been trying to come up with times to meet with each other, and we're looking at like 7 in the morning and 7 at night because we were so booked up during the day. So this is the time of year when everyone's thinking about next year. And part of that process in Twice Exceptional in our world is, especially when it comes to transition, is making that having that discussion about what do we use and how do we look at data and how do we look at it differently for our Twice Exceptional students to ensure that they are being put in the correct classes or curriculum, but then also that they're able to get the support they need for those classes and curriculum. And I'm going to go with the word olden days. A lot of our response was, well, if they need this, then they go to the Twice Exceptional program or the GTLD program. But we know the face of GTLD has changed to be Twice Exceptional, and as that change has happened, the types of support that we are doing is also changing. And so that's, going to be a little part of our discussion tonight, is how do we look at some of this data to figure out when do we look at students or when do we make different recommendations. So the big ones that you guys across the board are probably talking about are the enriched literacy curriculum, ELC, is out in all 4th grade next year, with very few exceptions. So if you have not heard about this at your school, then you're probably in a school that's an exception. And ELC was written based on our Centers for Enriched Study curriculum, and it's something that we have rolled out since 2017. And so next year it will be in all of our schools, which means that it is open to students enrolled in our schools, even if they're enrolled in special programs. So we have some schools like Diamond, who's had ELC for a while, and a lot of the kids in the what Asperger's Now Connections program are actually in that class, and they support the students in that class. At Barnsley, we've had that class self-contained. In other classes, we have push-in or pull-out support, depending on what it is the students need. Similarly, we have the compacted math with Math 4.5 and Math 5.6. And again, because that's in all of our schools in the county, there's a lot of different ways that people are supporting our twice exceptional students. But one thing we're doing when we look at our data now is saying to ourselves, it's not so much the kids who are being identified centrally. Those ones are pretty easy to find because they get a little flag from the central office that says, this child needs to be in this course. The ones that are harder are kids who we know are gifted, we know they are twice exceptional, we know they don't test well, and we know that the data points that we're using to identify students for these courses is not the best data for most of our twice exceptional students, unless they were already good at testing and they were already going to be identified. Similarly, we have in our middle schools, we're making those placements of those recommendations for advanced courses. All of our schools have advanced courses in middle school. How those are being rolled out and delivered is different at some schools. There's actually, I was actually doing a comparison of all the courses available at the different middle schools in the county. And I was pleased that when it comes especially to humanities, that not everyone has gone all in, because I think we also know that when advanced coursework is made for everybody, it doesn't meet the needs of our advanced learners. That's why we have it set up in a different way. But that's not to say that we want to be completely exclusionary and say you can't come in if you need support. And so again, looking at that data, students who are identified for the lottery for the magnet programs are automatically flagged for those advanced courses. But again, how do we look at our students? How do we look at our students, and how do we look at our students differently? And then as an IEP team, make some of those recommendations from elementary to middle school. And then also, how do we look at what the students actually need in terms of support when they get into those more advanced courses? And then very similarly, as we move up to high school tends to be a little bit different because we have so many different levels. We have so many different programs and specializations. We're looking at data differently there, but at the same time, we often are having those questions about how are we supporting our kids in advanced classes, and are we just saying, well, they're advanced so they don't need the support anymore, or are we coming up with more strategic ways to support our students? So with that, does anyone have any questions? And I do see the questions in the chat, and I will get to those towards the end. What's up?
I would really like to know how homeschool model teachers in secondary navigate this. What you're saying is, well, do you lessen the services or support, you pull away your supports, or do you add more difficulty in the classes? Because in order to do the latter, you have to, in order to add more difficult classes, advanced classes, you have to have the buy-in from it's not the teacher's decision, but you have to know that that teacher is going to support the student with those individualized supports that they need.
Right. And the answer, as we would expect, I think, is going to be very different for each school. But in general, we have different models. So one model that I would call out would be Westland Middle School. Westland Middle School has identified that in their incoming class, they have enough students with IEPs and 504s who have either been identified or considered for an advanced course, that they cohort all those students together by choice and have at least one co-taught supported section of the advanced courses. Sometimes they have two. I just pulled their data today, and I don't know that they're going to have enough for 2 classes next year, but I'm pretty sure they're going to have enough for at least 1 class next year. And so it's about creating a critical mass and then justifying your costs, your use of a teacher for that period, or your use of a para for that period. So in other years, if they don't, and critical mass is also determined by each school. Some people will say it's about 10 students in a class, others might say it's 5. So it's kind of going to depend on the needs of the student and the school itself. But it's creating that space that we need to spend a teacher or a paraeducator here to support, and what kind of supports do those students need when we do that. We have other schools that will make the decision that it is the general educator who's going to be responsible. It's not a co-taught class, but it is the expectation of the general educator to be able to implement the accommodations and supports the students need. And then in those situations, we end up doing more what we call a coaching model or a collaboration model. And that's where the special educators go and work directly with their gen ed peers so that they can help with modifying work. They might help with some of the grading. They might get the information and do a little bit of front loading with our students so that they're prepared. They might on the back end take an assignment, and then they do the breakdown and working with their individual students to meet those executive functioning needs, so that there's never an adult in the classroom, but that support is there. There are also some schools out there who still have a mindset that if you're in an advanced class, you don't need support. That's why you're in an advanced class. And it can be a lot harder to get support for our students in those classes. Other things that some schools have done, Tacoma Park is a good example of this one, partially because they have the magnet program. We've designated one case manager in their school as a twice exceptional case manager. He does the training with all of my case managers. He works with them. But more importantly than him personally, he's great, but more importantly for the school, they cohort the students by grade, and they cohort their twice exceptional students to put them into a specific resource class. And then they make sure that whichever special educator, they try and give it to our twice exceptional case manager, whichever is the largest group. But we specifically cohort our kids together. So again, we create that critical mass so that within one resource class, the kids who need something a little bit different are able to get that different, because they have more students in there who need more of the executive functioning self-advocacy work than possibly the special education, pre-teaching, reteaching kind of work. And so yeah, so that's a lot of what they would look at in terms of the resource classes. So Bev asked, what about specialized instruction and IEP goals when it comes to advanced students? So advanced students can have IEP goals in their area of need. The question kind of is, what is it about that area of need? So for example, we can have a student who's a phenomenal writer who has trouble getting all their ideas down in a logical order and working their way through the writing process. We can have kids who have fantastic ideas, but just can't put them on paper. And so when we're looking at what the specific specialized instruction and goals are, we really want to look at the standards for the grade level and look at the strengths and needs of the students, and then figure out, are they able to easily or meet those grade level challenges or grade level standards at a level that is appropriate for them. And sometimes it does mean that our kids are on grade level, because their content is on grade level, their ideas are on grade level, but what they are producing is not on grade level. And so it really is about breaking down some of the instruction and figuring out what it is. When my kids are older, usually high school, we spend a lot of time on mechanics because we can get our kids to 11th and 12th grade and still have a very poor relationship with commas and periods, because they're very stream of thought, and is not so much about, it's about refocusing them and getting them to, bring their work to closure and getting them to create a final product. And it's not always at that point about all of the content. The same way in math, the difference with our kids who struggle in math, they usually get those really high level concepts, but it's things like calculation and fluency that is a struggle for them. Those are students who might not have any goals in math. They have specialized instruction in that we teach them how to more effectively use their calculators. Once you get into the upper level math, you pretty much live on a calculator anyway. So the specialized instruction is making sure they know how to use their tools appropriately in order to answer those questions and produce their answers. We have students who really can't do simple calculation, who are in really, really, really advanced math classes. But because they have that tool of that calculator with them, they're able to express their knowledge of the content, and they're able to express their knowledge of the concepts, which is the more important part, because at the end of the day, they really do have a calculator. And I think we all remember back in the olden days, when everyone's like, you'll never have a calculator in your pocket. Oh, we do. And we have a lot of that same argument with like speech to text now, and parents, they have to learn to hold a pencil. Well, but you don't, because we all have speech to text, whether or not we use it, it's available. I have watched students who do a better job typing on their phones than they do typing on the computer because they're so used to doing stuff with their thumbs. Not my favorite, but at the same time, if they're getting the work done, they're getting the work done. And my job is to help refine after you get your ideas out, if that's how you're going to get them out, how do you use other tools to be more effective in your work? Ashley, do you want to share that? Because I like what you said, but I know you're going to say it better.
You're welcome to share for me.
So Ashley said it's also about increasing or refining skills instead of remaining stagnant with skills as they catch up with peers in areas where they were more advanced before. So I think if I'm reading that in the right direction, a lot of times, especially when our students are younger, they can race ahead in a lot of things and they can get to really high levels really quickly. Ashley?
I was going to ask, do you want me to add on to what I was saying?
Yeah, because I want to make, I don't know if how I read it is what you meant.
No, it is. I was just thinking also, because we look at a lot of rate of progress over time for students, and historically we've used MAP as targets, and you can look fall to fall or spring to spring to see where growth is. But for some of our students who might have, pardon me, more of that 2E profile, they may have been well above their same age peers or in the green or blue on some of those tests. But as they age advance, those skills don't continue to grow at the rate that you would expect because they've already started off so high. So what I mean by stretching the mental rubber band is really targeting those skills and teaching to expound on where students started. So it's not so much about just bridging the gap, it's really pushing them further.
Well said. That is what I thought you said, and I know I was not saying it as eloquently. And I think, there's also an opportunity in there to talk to parents, because the other thing we see is when our students are like in that almost like vertical line going up on things like their MAP scores, and then they start to plateau. One thing we have to look at as educators, and this is where our specialization as educators, regardless of being special education or not, we need to look at that and say, are they really plateauing, or did they just go so high so fast that they don't really test any higher because it's a percentile and the rest of the group is catching up? And so there's not going to be as much of a spread between them and their peers as their peers are working to catch up. which comes back to some of the work that we do in terms of perfectionism, self-advocacy, and some of those other pieces about identity with twice exceptional students. Because, and with twice exceptional and gifted students, because one thing that we know happens with our twice exceptional and gifted students is that when things are really, really easy for them for a really, really long time, they don't build the skills of resiliency. They don't build basic study skills, basic group working skills, because it just comes to them so easily. And then the first time that something is hard for them, we usually refer to that as hitting the wall. Because the first time something's hard for them, they go, oh my God, am I not really as smart as I thought I was? Am I not really everything I thought I was? And the answer is you are, but while everyone had to work really hard to get where you are, and they've built these skills of resiliency and study skills and just this working for something, if you don't hit the wall until high school, if you don't hit the wall until college, you've gone through 12 years at that point, 12 years of education, and never had been really challenged. And so you don't have the skills to suddenly be in a room full of kids who are all about the same level as you. And some of them have had to struggle to get there and some have not. And so you have like this pit that you can fall into. And so when we're looking at those skills and we're looking at plateaus and we're looking at how the data is playing out, it's as much about figuring out if they are truly plateauing or if they are just being caught up with the rest of the group. And then our question to ourselves is, have we done enough to keep them? Have we given them that specialized instruction to help them build some of those skills and some of that resiliency as well? Any other questions?
I don't have so much a question, but since people have been bringing up testing and we're in testing time, I've heard a couple of themes that I just want to resonate out there. And that's the, not relying on the single data point. And even when you are looking at the single data point, making sure you're having some context in it. While we do have, right, twice exceptional students who might be scoring really high, there are also those who, whether it's how they engage with the test or maybe because some of their needs are more behavioral based, the testing environment is not where they show best. And over accommodating and providing interventions for students based just on how they're performing on assessments when they show very differently in the classroom is definitely something that I know goes on.
Absolutely. And, we actually had a meeting today, and in talking to the school team, and the student had moved from one school to another. And when they moved to the other school, they put them down a level in the math class. And, we're talking through what math is the student taking, and the student's taking this math, okay. And then at some point, the person from the school said, yeah, we put them in that math course because the school they came from said, oh, they were in the higher level math last year, but their behaviors are just so blah, 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 that we don't think it's the right setting. We think you should move them back. Well, so that's what the school team did, because that was the information that they were provided with. And here we are in May, and the conversation we're having, like, well, what time of day do the behaviors occur most? Math. Well, because when you've already taken half of a class, you're not going to be as engaged, you're not learning, you're not stretching, and you have a lot more time to get yourself in trouble. But again, using singular data points like how students are behaving or how things are happening in a single moment in time without any of that context can have really long-term impacts on the students, because now this particular student, we're not really sure what to do with them for the math point, because we know what class they should be going into, but they've now missed a year of instruction because they essentially repeated a year of instruction. And so we're kind of left with, like, how do we best support this student's needs and not set them up to have another year like they did this year in math? So I think, just as an example, I'm going to share my screen for a moment. And I'm actually going to turn off the recording.